the newsagents.
My message is very, very clear that this NATO summit is an opportunity for allies to stand together, to strengthen their resolve, particularly in light of that appalling attack against Russian aggression. I'm pleased to have the early opportunity to affirm and reaffirm.
That is the Prime Minister about to board what will no doubt be christened Keir Force One, on his way to the United States, his first foray into international politics as Britain's new Prime Minister.
Cleared for takeoff. Keir
Very good.
and pleasant danger. We have not given up on our dream of becoming headline writers for the tabloids at some point in our career.
It's all we're probably good for. But this is serious business, the 75th anniversary of NATO, and whether Britain is spending enough on defence. Is Keir Starmer going to come under pressure to pledge even more? Welcome to the newsagents. It's John.
It's Emily.
It's Lewis.
And, I mean, there have been so many pinch-yourself moments, but Sir Keir Starmer landing at Joint Base Andrews, or Andrews Air Force Base as was, and you get the full panoply of the American state convoy taking you into Washington, D.C., all the outriders, all the police motorbikes. It is something else.
Oh my God. This time last week, right? We're recording this at 1:30 on Wednesday. This time last week, He was doing his last door knocking, his last round.
He was at a little football ground somewhere.
I mean, the speed at which things happen is just whiplash inducing. And I think the other thing that it makes you realise is how much you can actually do in a short space of time if you have a cohesive plan for government, right? I mean, not just having an umbrella when it's raining, but kind of saying, we know what we're doing, everyone's in their posts, I know who I'm going to put in. The first 3 bits of policy have already basically been announced or suggested, whether it's Rachel Reeves and planning, whether it's Wes Streeting and the doctors and trying to sort out the junior doctors' strike.
And saying that the NHS is an economic growth department.
Right. And now Keir Starmer is already kind of left this continent and he's arrived to meet the US president, who weirdly probably needs him right now more than he needs Joe Biden.
Yeah, he's never met Biden before, which actually surprised me when I read that this morning, because, it does happen from time to time at kind of international meetings. He's met most of his European counterparts before, but he's never met Biden before. So, I mean,
a lot of his cabinet have, funnily enough.
Yeah.
I mean, Peter Kyle has met Biden twice.
Yeah.
David Lammy's met Biden. It's interesting that he sort of sent others ahead of him and not done it himself.
Yeah, so he's never met him. So, obviously, it's the biggest of big moments, right, for an incoming Prime Minister. And it's happened unusually early in the post-election period. No, normally it would happen a little bit later, but just by accident of the calendar, everyone knew that this NATO summit was happening. They knew it would be the first big agenda item in the first week of whoever won the election. And what it does mean is, look, there's been a bit of a post-election glow, inevitably, with the new government. A lot of new energy, new ministers, finally getting the chance to do the thing that they've sort of fantasised about for so long, which is actually make some decisions for once. But it does mean that some of the early trade-offs about governing and some of that early glow will inevitably start to come off, because it brings into sharper focus the fact that something that Starmer did not do in the campaign, which is set out an actual roadmap to achieve 2.5% of defence spending as a proportion of GDP. Something that he has said he wants to do, but will not give a timetable in terms of when he will achieve it. And that is going to be at the 75th anniversary of NATO summit. That is something that is going to be high on the agenda, because the whole point of this summit, one of the points of this summit, is to try and show to Russia, to China, to the West enemies, that the West is rearming. And Starmer is sat there in number 10, by the way, putting out press releases saying he wants other countries to make that commitment to 2.5%. But he's got to show, at least at some point, how he intends to get there.
Lewis, you left out one thing of who he has to show that to. They have to show that to Donald Trump.
Well, indeed so.
Because Donald Trump is the one that wants to see that the European nations are stumping up the cash to make NATO kind of plausible for him, because he thinks America is being taken for a ride. They don't spend enough on defence. It has been a perennial complaint of American presidents, and it'll be really interesting to see whether Starmer takes this moment to commit to 2.5%. But if he does, you'd think, well, why didn't you do that during the election campaign when it could have led to a lot of Tory attacks kind of falling flat?
I think this would be a really easy political win for Starmer to arrive with the flags flying behind him and announce an increase in defence spending. I think the fact that he said he's not going to is actually playing in his favour, because he has made clear that anything that he spends has to be justified by improvements to the economy. He goes back to that priority of growth. He goes back to that question of fiscal responsibility. And it's pretty easy, actually, for any leader to arrive in America, stars and stripes, and pledge more money. But I think there is a quiet confidence in saying, it will happen. I know this will happen. But I will tell you when it will happen, because it will happen as a result of the improvements we've already made. It's not as neat a political headline, but I think it shows an actual commitment to what you have said right the way through the campaign.
Well, except that he's also saying that defence is his government's number one priority. So if defence is his government's number one priority, it necessitates that you have to find a credible way of meeting your objective to get to 2.5%. And the real reason he's not doing it, I don't think it's for good politics. The reason he's not doing it is because we talk about 0.5% and it seems really small, but that's about £12.5 billion. Like £12.5 billion from a defence budget, which is about 50 billion at the moment, obviously a big, significant increase. But to find £12.5 billion will be an enormous task, with the public finances being what they are. So you've got those two different objectives, which are to some extent incompatible, which is, yes, we want to make this spending once we get growth. But the problem with defence spending, of course, is it has such huge lag times. If you want to increase your armaments, or you want to increase your defence capabilities for say 5 years time or 10 years time, the truth is you have to make that decision today, and you have to set the decisions in place today to get to that objective. So the problem with saying that we'll get there at some point is that for every day or for every month or for every year you wait, you're increasing the lag time.
Morally, we are still in a very good place compared to most of the NATO countries. We come in, I think, at 10th, right?
Yeah.
Not surprising that the big spenders, Poland, Estonia, what do you know about that? They're right on the border with Russia, right? US third. But I think, the question is whether we can lecture other countries to, our defence spending is about 2.3%. And there are, I think, at least 20 countries in that NATO bloc who have not matched that level of spending from their GDP. I think actually that does put us in a place where we can say, we'll increase even more. But at the moment, we're at the top 10 and you guys have some catching up to do. And the Trump thing is twofold. I think it's really interesting because Donald Trump has made clear that he wants to see NATO countries spend more to take on their fair share, which they are now doing. And he's also made clear that he doesn't really believe in funding for Ukraine, particularly. He thinks that he can just sort out the war on day one, if he got back into power. And I think there is a double angle on what NATO has to do, which is not just ape what Trump is saying about spending, but also say, don't think he's your friend on this. He is not your friend on this.
The other thing to bear in mind is the power of lobbying and lobby groups with interest. Now, if it's the health service, we know who to go to, who will come on this podcast and say the health service needs more money, we need more doctors.
King's Fund,
yeah, exactly. There are plenty of bodies out there.
Yeah.
The defence industry is a slightly more kind of circumspect, but it's happening already. Keir Starmer has been Prime Minister for 5 days, 6 days now, and already you are getting stories appearing saying, well, our army is the smallest it's been since Napoleonic times.
We could fight a war for a week.
We can't do this, and we can't. They're already trying to lobby in their own way. It's not as public as other lobby groups, but they are lobbying for more money and why Britain could be defenceless.
But that's former heads of the army. When you say lobbying, it's not the defence companies. It's not like Raytheon.
No, but you can be sure
the military-industrial complex.
The military-industrial complex is not far behind wanting this stuff to happen.
Yeah.
It's in the interests of Raytheon or whichever BAE Systems or whoever it happens to be that this money is invested. And, and the ex-defence chiefs often sit on the boards of big defence companies.
Interesting, if you look at the scalps on the Tory side, the former chair of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood, now out. Johnny Mercer, a former military man. Veterans were his big thing. But also those voices are out. But Labour has also brought in, I think it's really important to recognise, loads of former servicemen and women,
One of whom has just been made the Veterans Minister, who's a new MP.
Exactly.
Never been a minister before,
Amazing.
a guy called Al Cairns, who's the new MP for Birmingham Selly Oak. But he's a former army man and he's now a Minister for Veterans Affairs in the new government.
One of the new Lib Dem MPs was the guy who actually trained up the Iraqi army against ISIS.
Which is two really important bits of context to this, right? Well, one is geopolitical and one is American. One is for Labour. One is obviously, I mean, sometimes we think we forget. I mean, the reason that we're talking about defence, or we should talk about defence more, is that Europe and the West has basically failed in these last 2 years to rearm at the same time that Russia has basically turned its economy to a war economy. Yeah. So it is outproducing us in shells, in military tech, in almost everything.
And using its sons and daughters to send them into an illegal war.
Correct, absolutely. But it does mean that the West, if we are serious about sort of standing up to that aggression, then we potentially look frail. And then the other bit, of course, is the American bit of political context, which is that Labour insiders are increasingly, like everybody else in Europe, increasingly aware that it is looking likelier and likelier that they will have to deal with a Trump restoration. And a Starmer premiership could turn on that, in a sense that in the post-Brexit world, where we're out of the EU architecture, our Anglo-American relations are more important than they've ever been. And so it's going to become more and more important. I mean, this is the kind of backdrop to this weird meeting with Starmer and Biden today, which should be a kind of crowning moment for Starmer, that in the back of his mind, he'll be looking at Biden and thinking in 6 months' time, on the current trajectory, you're not going to be here because of your political...
Maybe 1 month's time, who knows?
Well, indeed so, because of your... Yeah, or he could be a lame duck, right? And there could be a new Democratic candidate because of these ongoing questions about his age.
But you're dealing always with the office. I think that's the important thing. When Starmer gets off the plane, when he heads into the White House, when he talks to the US president, it's not Biden. It is the US president.
No, I think it is more than that. I think that the relationships that exist, and when it's something as sort of, whiplash inducing as the difference between Trump, say, and Biden, you've got to have people there who you have confidence.
But he's not going to change policy. He's not going to change the UK's defence policy, depending on whether it's Biden or Trump.
No,
he will. He might, because
you need to say, if it's Trump as the next president, and him saying, "I'm not really interested in NATO, and I want to sue for peace over Ukraine in a way that we would think in Western Europe as being a capitulation or a surrender," which is, I think, probably what Trump would want. You would have to say, actually, God, yeah, we need to react differently.
And this all feeds into a question which is a really interesting kind of question going on just beneath the surface at the moment in government, which is one of the early decisions they've made, which is about who our next ambassador to the US will be to, on paper, replace Karen Pierce, who's widely considered to have done a good job over there. It was going to be going. The last government decided at the last minute to give it to a guy called Tim Barrow, who used to be our ambassador to the EU. He has now been told that he will not be getting it, and there's been a lot of speculation that it could end up being a far more political appointment because it's our most sort of important diplomatic post that would ruffle the Foreign Office in all sorts of ways. But there's been speculation that perhaps it could be David Miliband, or it could be even be Peter Mandelson.
I mean,
and then there's a question about, are these the right people to actually get into Trump world?
Given that David Miliband, who obviously is very much part of the wider Labour family, has been talking for nearly 8 years about the age of impunity under Trump, would you risk that if Trump was back in the White House?
If Hillary Clinton were president, great.
Look, we saw from the Trump first term, Kim Darroch I knew very well when he was our ambassador in Washington and I was out there.
And Trump basically got him sacked.
You need to have somebody there who can do business. And actually, Karen Pierce, who I also know well, I mean, she was at Mar-a-Lago not that long ago with David Cameron, discussing kind of, Ukraine, discussing NATO, discussing these sort of things.
And apparently she got him in, that it was a result of her.
And
it's the peachiest job. As a Prime Minister,
nature.
It is the peachiest job you can hand out, basically, after Foreign Secretary, isn't it? The peachiest job is basically the UK ambassador to the US.
Oh,
right?
Completely.
So,
it's an absolutely wonderful job. That house on Massachusetts Avenue, the Lutyens mansion.
All right. We've got the pitch for it now, of course.
I feel like
Ambassador Sopel, that's got quite the ring to it,
I'm disappointed my name is not being included there.
Well, you have now.
But
John Sopel throws his hat into the ring.
Look how many people, are quietly lobbying Keir Starmer now to get that job.
Except that, as John said, if Trump wins, it becomes a bit less peachy in the sense that we have literal evidence that if Trump doesn't like you, he can get you sacked.
So it has to be somebody that Trump's never heard of. I mean, literally.
It has to be someone
or fancies.
Or
does that rule you out, John?
No, it has to be someone who, when they get appointed, say, I've always hugely admired Donald Trump, and that will give you a lot of way.
And your views about Donald Trump?
I've always hugely admired what he's done for my journalistic career.
Okay.
And your soon-to-be diplomatic career.
We'll be back after a break with the Ferrari Rocher.
And Andrew Mitchell, the Shadow Foreign Secretary. Well, we are joined in the studio by the man who was the Deputy Foreign Secretary, but who is now the Shadow Foreign Secretary after the Foreign Secretary, David Cameron, said he was off. Andrew Mitchell, lovely to see you. Well done on getting your seat back. Commiserations on a pretty awful result. How bad are things for the Conservative Party right now?
Well, it could be worse. I had to write 2 speeches on polling day evening, not least because in the BBC exit poll I was out. But fortunately, my constituents have kept me on, and I'm obviously delighted to be back representing the Royal Town in Parliament. It was a dreadful night. There was a certain sense of déjà vu. I lost my seat in 1997 and was then out for 4 years before coming back into Parliament in 2001. And the déjà vu was real because there were a whole series of things. It was a very weak campaign in 97. Lots of things went wrong. Same thing happened this time. But we now have to be an effective opposition. An effective opposition is not one that is very loud. It's one that holds the government to account.
Andrew, can we just go back to the 2 speeches moment? Because we saw you just before the election on the day of the Conservative manifesto launch, and I think there was real concern that you could lose in Sutton Coldfield. I know that sort of stayed with you right up to the end, it sounds like, if you had 2 speeches. What are the preparations that you make? I mean, what is going on sort of in your head and in your activities when you think this could be the end of my parliamentary career?
Well, I was obviously determined to win, and I had an absolutely brilliant team in Sutton Coldfield helping me. And we fought a very good campaign. It's my 11th general election campaign, and by much the toughest. But we really stood on my record and put our best foot forward. And I must say that
local. I mean, did you mention Rishi on the doorstep? Did you mention the Conservatives, or did you just say, you know me and what I've done?
We fought a local campaign. We have the benefit, of course, of the fact that Labour Birmingham City Council has been bankrupted by the Labour councillors, and that meant that a lot of my constituents' council tax was going up by 21% over 2 years. 3 out of 4 of the libraries are going to close, I fear now. So we've focused on that with the sort of slogan that if you like Birmingham Labour Council, you're going to love a Labour government.
We should say, just in parenthesis, that many councils that have been Conservative run have also gone bankrupt. This is not specific to Birmingham, but it is for you in your seat, I understand.
Well, yes, except that the Labour Party themselves said that the cause of the bankruptcy in Birmingham was not Tory austerity. Their Labour Improvement Board said in May 2023, this is a homegrown crisis. So we did have that, and that was obviously helpful. And we took an early decision to focus on my record and on what was happening in the West Midlands. And of course, we had lost Andy Street, who was a very popular, very brilliant mayor, and that was a bit of a wake-up call as well. But having said all that, it was 6 weeks of hard pounding. I visited hundreds and hundreds of doorsteps. We wrote very large numbers of letters. We put out a lot of leaflets. In fact, on the final day of the campaign, one chap said to me, I'm going to support you so long as you don't put another leaflet through my door. Did
you get doors slammed? Did you get nasty words?
Never. You know, and I've never had such a warm response on the doorstep. But a lot of people made it clear they were supporting me and not the national campaign.
Not the Conservatives.
And not the Conservative Party nationally. And a lot of Tories sat on their hands as well. So it was a very, very difficult campaign.
So here we are, where we are now. You're the Shadow Foreign Secretary. Do you have an office yet?
No, but I'm working on it.
So you don't know where to sit yet?
And there's a couple of folks sitting outside my old ministerial office where I'm squatting who are waiting I think they're waiting for me to relinquish the key so they can take it over. But this always happens at the start of Parliament.
Why haven't you given them the key?
No, the key is there. Right. They're being rather polite, but they're just waiting for me to get out.
Right, so you haven't got your office yet, but you are the Shadow Foreign Secretary. Interesting. You had a Shadow Cabinet meeting yesterday, and Kemi Badenoch went after Rishi Sunak, by all accounts, saying that the campaign was catastrophic, that D-Day cost Penny Mordaunt her seat in Portsmouth because Rishi Sunak went back early. She said it was vaguely unconstitutional, that he had called a general election without consulting the cabinet first. She put the boot in.
Well, I absolutely deplore leaking of shadow cabinet or cabinet meetings. I don't know who leaked that. it is a broadly accurate account. And if the Tory party is to have any chance at all, we've got to rediscover the discipline that is required to be an effective operation in the House of Commons, whether you're in government or in opposition. And leaking like that is corrosive, unnecessary, and deplorable.
But is she right?
Well, as a matter of fact, I don't think she is right. But and I don't know who leaked it either. But
Who do you suspect?
It's a reprehensible act. It should not have happened, and whoever did it owes an apology to the chief whip and the leader of the party.
But does Rishi bear culpability for the scale of the defeat, the manner in which the early election was called, the way the campaign was fought?
Well, he has taken responsibility very properly and nobly for that. My view is that the Archangel Gabriel would not have been able to win the last election for the Conservatives. No party has ever won 5 elections on the trot. We are a cricket-playing country. We believe in the principle of letting the other team have a go, which is why no party's ever won 5 on the trot. Clearly...
That's a very nice spin, just to use your cricketing metaphor. I'm not sure that it was about sort of fairness to the other side. It was absolute desperation in the country, wasn't it?
Well, I think there was something wonderful, actually, about the awesome power of democracy. Because I spent a lot of my political career working in the developing world, where people fight and die to be able to have democratic accountability. And, the electorate saying that Liz Truss was not to serve in Parliament, delivering the result that they did, I thought was a wonderful showing for democracy, actually very good for attracting inward investment into Britain, because it shows the stability that we have here. But, the electorate...
it was wonderful that Liz Truss lost.
No, I didn't say that. I said I was talking about the awesome power of democracy, the electorate are the masters, and we are the public servants, and we need to remember that.
If you want a metaphor for what happened on Thursday night, you look at all the seats that used to have Conservative Prime Ministers in them. Henley, Uxbridge, Maidenhead, Norfolk, Witney, and you see them all taken by opposition parties. I mean, there is something very totemic, isn't there, about the electorate saying, I just want to wipe that out, wipe that memory out. Was it about the leadership in the end?
I think it was much more than that. And we will have plenty of time now to work out the lessons from what has happened. And the Tory party is a ruthless collection of people who have serious centre-right beliefs. It's not an accident that we have been the most successful political party in the Western world. We've been in power for large amounts of the last 100 years. We will recover, but we will recover because now we will work together to see what has gone wrong and to assemble the values, the principles, and revive the values and principles and beliefs which will take us back into government. And we need to do that from a spirit of energy and humility.
I know you will say that all these thoughts take time, but you are a master, Andrew, at assessing the political mood. Your first reflection of why you lost. I mean, get away from the cricket for a moment and get away from the sense that, this is a country that likes to see each party. When you look back at the last 14 years or even at the campaign, what do you really think was the thing that lost you power?
Well, remember that for the first 9 of those 14 years, we consistently won elections, either in coalition or on our own. I think that David Cameron was a very good Prime Minister. We can argue about Brexit, but I think he was a very good Prime Minister, leaving that on one side. I think what went wrong was in the last 5 years, and I suspect that the public, whether it's true or not, the public would say that the ethos of service to the people was not at the top of the Conservative Party what was coming across.
Would you agree with that?
I think that we have to be ruthlessly self-reflective on recognising that feeling was highly prevalent amongst the electorate.
You've got a leadership contest that will be coming up. I mean, I don't quite know what the timescale is, and I know that is being argued about at the moment. But given the obvious names that are there, Kemi Badenoch, maybe Priti Patel, maybe Suella Braverman, maybe Tom Tugendhat, I don't know, maybe there are others, maybe Andrew Mitchell, I don't know.
Are there others, Andrew?
Let me reassure you on that score. Definitely not.
Definitely not.
It's the most
Mitchell.
incredibly
Who would
difficult
you
job.
back?
I have no idea yet. I recognise that these are all people with real ability and something to offer the party and their country. I think that the example of Michael Howard in 2005 is the right example for the party to follow. And bear in mind that I was the campaign...
Which is for him to carry on for some time.
Yes, it is to
after
allow
losing the election.
It is allow the party conference when the party's not going to get a lot of attention at the moment, but at the party conference people will switch on to see what's going on, at least for a bit. And I think that is the time when those who bravely put themselves forward to lead the opposition should tell everyone what they have to offer, so that there can be a judgment.
Like a brokered convention.
But the point is this. I mean, I say that. Remember that in 2005 I was the campaign manager for David Davis. Had Michael Howard not gone long, David Davis would have been leader of the opposition.
Instead of
which,
Cameron.
because he did go wrong, David Cameron got it. I'm arguing that to take a long view, give people a chance. Don't rush these things. We're going to be in opposition now for 5 years. Let's make sure that we get the right leader first time and don't go through some of the agonies we went through when we were last in opposition.
But you know these people well. You've served in government with them.
They all have virtues. They all have virtues.
So on the basis of those particular names, is there one that you think, oh no, I don't think that, Suella? Would she be a good leader of the Conservative Party now? Would she bring unity?
I think it's very important that all these people who are bravely, as I say, putting their names forward, we should all be able to have a good look and assess
Are you not going to engage?
What about direction? I mean, do you feel that it is time for a centrist rather than a further to the right candidate, or would you not even? Is it all?
Well, what I would definitely say is that David Cameron taught us the lesson that you only win elections from the centre. You do not win elections from the extremes. And people say, oh, well, what about Mrs. Thatcher? If you look at Mrs. Thatcher's 1979 election, it was a very centrist. There's no mentions of privatisation or anything like that. It was a very centrist document. So we need as a party to remember that. You do not win elections from the extremes. You win elections from the centre.
So do you form any kind of relationship with Nigel Farage? Does he become part of the Conservative Party, or does you become part of Reform?
Now, neither of those things is remotely plausible. And bear in mind, he has been trying to burn down the Conservative building. So I can't see. I
think we should just add in.
Yeah, no criminal offences.
No. I mean metaphorically.
Yes. Call up the Scotland Yard. Nigel Farage is trying to burn down CCHQ.
No, I count Nigel as a friend. I don't approve of his politics at all, of course, but I have counted him as a friend for many years now, actually, and he's a very big political force, but he is not a Conservative. And
can you spell that out? Why would you count him as a friend and not agree with him at all? I'm not saying that all politicians have to agree with each other, but
I have lots of friends with whom I don't agree politically. It doesn't mean that they're not friends. I think people who fall out on the basis of political views, unless they're very, very extreme.
Okay, but I guess the question many people have is whether Nigel Farage's views are not just political views in terms of what you should do in policy, but whether there are dog whistle views that are really quite ugly to large tranches of the population. That's what I'm asking you about.
Well, I would always seek to call out dog whistle views.
To him?
And yeah, I would certainly say that to him. But
have you?
But no, I haven't, because I haven't seen him since the particular
dog whistle.
I mean, what about the comments he made about Rishi Sunak?
I thought that was very bad indeed. But the point is this, that Nigel Farage has been a very big figure in British politics. I read somewhere that a serious commentator was saying he was one of the most influential figures in recent years. But the way to deal with Reform and with Nigel is to demonstrate that their arguments are not correct, their solutions sometimes I think are quite facile, and that it is the Conservative Party which speaks for the centre-right in Britain, and that's what we have to get back.
If I pull you forward to today, Keir Starmer, I mean, in this sort of whirlwind week that we're having, is now at the White House going to meet Jill Biden, the leader of the free world. Do you wish him well on the world stage?
Of course. And where we think he is doing the right thing, we, the Conservatives, will back him.
What did you think when you heard that they had scrapped the Rwanda scheme, given your own slightly lukewarm support for it, given comments that you had made before you were back in government?
Well, I thought that when Rishi reset the plans on illegal migration, he did the right thing. He restored the relationship with France, which was in a terrible position after Boris. He increased enormously the number of case handlers. He made it clear that we would introduce safe and legal route once we got illegal migration under control, and he supported the Rwanda scheme. My opposition to the Rwanda scheme originally was on the grounds of cost, and also that on its own it wouldn't have any effect. So I saw the Rwanda scheme as being a deterrent and being part of the mix. My concern with what the government has done now is I'm not aware that they've actually spoken to Rwanda, and if they have not, if they just announced this in the media and haven't spoken to Rwanda, which is a close ally and which has been trying to help Britain, they have been.
Well, hang on, they got a lot of money. They got paid a lot of money, which we're not getting back.
They could have had the best deal ever.
They were trying to help Britain, and Rwanda is a country and an ally. It's not a cartoon, and it's very important that they are treated with respect. So I hope that senior Labour ministers now have been in touch with Rwanda, have explained their plans, have thanked Rwanda for being willing to be part of this scheme, and not just communicated by media foghorn.
Are you pleased it's gone?
I think that the deterrent mix which Rwanda added had a part to play in the scheme, and we will now see whether removing it leads to more people coming illegally over the seas and putting themselves into the hands of the modern day equivalent of the slave trader. And I fear it will mean that, because journalists went to Calais and talked to a range of people, all of whom indicated that if there was a Labour government, they'd be looking for passage across. So I very much hope that won't be the case, but if it is the case, it will underline why Rishi was right to keep the Rwanda scheme when he became Prime Minister.
In that speech in Parliament as the opposition leader, we saw how gracious and how effectively Rishi Sunak was communicating. And I think a lot of people were scratching their heads at that point and saying, what a nice guy. Like, what happened to him during the course of his premiership? Do you think he was just kind of badly advised?
I think that no incoming Prime Minister has been handed such a poisoned chalice as Rishi received 19 or so months ago. And I do also think that historians and chroniclers will treat him with much more generosity than some of his contemporaries are treating him with at the moment.
But just on that, I just wonder whether what we saw in that concession speech in Downing Street at the end of last week and what we've seen in the Commons yesterday was a much more gracious, generous, calmer, friendlier version than the snippy, slightly arrogant, brittle person that we saw before. I just wonder whether if he'd campaigned a bit more like a guy that has got much more likability, he'd have done better.
Well, the circumstances were entirely different, and I think it's hard to imagine the pressure that a Prime Minister is under when, in the full pelt of an election campaign, he can see for himself what is happening. The pressure that must have been on Rishi over the last 4 or 5 weeks is immense.
Yeah. Last thought, Andrew. Rishi's predecessor, William Hague, was the one who brought in the chance for the grassroots Conservative membership to have the vote on the next leader. Do you think that that is an important link? Would you like to see members voting for your next leader? Or do you think that the MPs have a much better sense of who serves them better?
I think it's both. Our members must have a say in who the leader is. We're a mass membership party. Of course, they must have that say. But equally, it's very.
It privileges people who can afford to join the party. Essentially, as
I think
a
we're the least expensive of the three main political parties.
Go on, you were going to qualify that. You were saying it's very important that the members have a say.
It's very important that members have a say. We are a mass membership party, but equally, you don't want to get into the position which the Labour Party got into under Corbyn and we got into under Liz Truss, where the majority of their members of Parliament did not support the leader, and I think that's an untenable position. So. Well, I don't know whether
Where's the waiting?
So electoral college kind of system.
So I don't know what the opportunity is to tweak the rules. I don't know what the voluntary party would want and what our colleagues on the 1922 committee and the party board would want. But it seems to me that those are the two key ingredients. One, you don't want a leader who does not command majority support amongst members of the House of Commons in their party, but you also want a very significant say and real involvement for the membership across the country.
Andrew Mitchell, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we go, Sir James Dyson, he of the eponymous electrical appliances that dry our hands and clean our houses and all the rest of it. He was a great brexiteer who then moved his headquarters to Singapore once Brexit had been achieved, which didn't seem to be the greatest vote of confidence. And he's just laid off a whole load of people, hasn't he?
1,000 people, yeah, in a restructuring of the business of his business, and it is going to be moving some production out of the UK. Some of the R&D and so on, he says, will remain, but it is an early kind of salutary reminder to the new government, again going back to that idea of being a bit of a glow about the harsh realities, economic realities that it is inherited. And one thing that he has, I mean, this is a government, obviously Rachel Reeves has been talking all week about the importance of unlocking private sector, domestic and international private sector investments, and this is a very early unwelcome sign of something which you'll talk, a lot of manufacturers will tell you, not necessarily related here to the Dyson decision, but lots of others will say, you know, in a world of the high subsidies of the United States with the Inflation Reduction Act, EU coming in with its own package, the UK has been squeezed in terms of the investment race, and the new government, without much money to play with, talking about unlocking the private sector, it's going to have to develop a rapid plan, a comprehensive plan, if they are really serious about attracting that investment at the same time as being squeezed by those two blocks.
He also, James Dyson, sued the Mirror for calling him the vacuum cleaner tycoon who championed vote leave due to the economic opportunities it would bring to British industry before moving his global head office to Singapore. Yesterday, he lost.
We'll be back tomorrow. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.